Vice President Kamala Harris took part in a live-streamed event in Michigan last night with Oprah Winfrey. Last night's Unite for America event brought together over 100 online groups, including some celebrities. Chris Rock was there, Ben Stiller, Meryl Streep. A few moments from that 90-minute forum here.
We have so many entrepreneurs in our country who have great ideas, incredible work ethic, but not necessarily access to capital, because not everybody, like my opponent, was handed $400 million on a silver plate that he filed bankruptcy 6 times on. And so part of my plan is to give startup small businesses a $50,000 tax deduction to start up their small business. Right now it's $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So that's part of my plan.
That's a teeny tiny business.
That's a business in
teeny tiny business.
It's a concept of a business, right?
Yes.
You know where I'm going. I think for far too long on the issue of gun violence, some people have been pushing a really false choice to suggest you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, and I'm in favor of assault weapons bans, universal background checks, red flag laws. And these are just common sense. These are just common sense.
I thought it was so powerful at the convention when you said you have guns. No, at the debate.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes. I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that.
But
my staff will deal with that later.
Yeah.
Vice President Harris saying somebody breaks into my house, they're getting shot. Talking about guns, but Joe, the policies she laid out there have overwhelming support.
You know what we say in the South, Willie? I'm sorry. You know what we say in the South when somebody says that? Yeah. So, what's your point? I mean, yeah, of course, somebody break into the house. Yeah.
I think one of the reasons Oprah pointed that out is went in line with, like, that's not something you're used to a Democrat saying. If you come in my house, I'm going to shoot you. That sounds hits a little bit differently. But those policies she was talking about, red flag laws, universal background checks, have overwhelming support. And just bigger picture, Joe, we talk about not grading Donald Trump on a curve. Watch those 90 minutes of Vice President Harris talking about policy. You don't have to agree with all of it or any of it if you don't want to.
Right.
And then just take what Donald Trump was doing at his anti-Semitism event, ironically called that as he was making anti-Semitic comments throughout, a rambling, self-indulgent, self-pitying speech. Just stop and watch those two events if you have the time, if you're still undecided, and think it through.
I mean, it really is. It's not political. It's objective. I mean, you just get the transcripts for both of these people. One is talking policy, a nuanced approach on several issues. The other is rambling, incoherent. Sentences never seem to find a resting place with a period at the end of them. Thoughts are just again, jumbled. But you look, though, at some of the things she said. We talked about gun ownership, Reverend Al. She supports, I mean, her positions on gun ownership. I'm sure Republicans, the NRA, extremists will try to say she's extreme. What she talked about are 90% issues, 80% issues, even talking about the banning of military-style weapons. That's, you know, most polls I've seen over the past decade show 2/3 of Americans support that. Maybe some will show it's around 50%. But none of those positions are radical. And then you hear her talking about something that I wanted Democrats and Republicans to talk about for a long time, and that is making billionaires and multinational corporations pay their fair share, but telling small business owners, people that run family restaurants, that want to start up a family restaurant, want to start up a family hardware store, entrepreneurs that want to start, you know, a tech company in their garage or their parents' garage, and they have something to build on. She's saying, here, we're going to give you a $50,000 tax credit. That not only helps small businesses that drive America's economy, that really should for a person of good faith, send a strong message that she is not a tax and spend left-winger, a tax and spend progressive. She understands the importance of small business. She understands the importance of giving people who want to help themselves a step forward into the business world.
Absolutely. I think clearly when she did this 90-minute conversation with Town Hall with Oprah, you begin to see with those of us that have known Kamala Harris is that she's not a left-wing kind of radical. She is someone right in the center of where this country is. Whether we agree with her or not, those of us that may be to the left of her, that's who she is. And when she talks about investing, giving the $50,000 tax cut to small businesses, not only are they the ground of America's economy, they're the major employers in many of our communities. So people on the ground work in these kind of small businesses more than they do in big corporations. That's who she's speaking to. And the contrast, her giving these policy statements and giving her how she relates to the average gun owner who also doesn't want to see assault weapons, and how she relates to people that need small businesses and lifts at the bottom, and contrast that to Donald Trump, who goes to the speech yesterday on "You owe me, Israel, and I did this for you, and y'all are so ungrateful, and I've been a victim all my life, even though I inherited hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm the victim, and nobody's giving me the credit for I want." The contrast in conversations and style should tell America who should bring us forward.
And it says if he loses this election, he's going to blame it on the Jews. That's really an interesting thing to say at an anti-Semitic conference, anti-Semitic event. Alicia, you know what I thought was interesting about this Oprah event? First of all, it's online. And so it lives today, tomorrow, forever online throughout the rest of this campaign. Also, you know, you just look at that picture. It's interesting. There's such a contrast because here she's doing something that breaks through the noise, that breaks through from politics into pop culture. But while doing that, she doesn't do it to like get a wrestler rip his shirt off at her convention. She does it to talk about policy, to talk about whether it's gun ownership, whether it's the balancing of gun rights and gun safety, whether it's talking about helping small businesses and entrepreneurs with a $50,000 tax cut, whether it's talking about the importance of women's health care and keeping women safe. She puts out more policy and actually explains it than the man who has been calling her stupid for years, Donald Trump, who, again, just can't seem to piece together a sentence.
Joe, I agree, and I would love to see Kamala Harris do more events like last night and to do them with local press and to just, flood the zone, so to speak, because the more that she's out there, I think it's better for her. And it's also the country deserves to know who she is and what she stands for. And to the Rev's point, it's a good strategy politically because the more she's out there, the less she can be branded as a crazy liberal. You look at how her performance in the debate and you think, I don't know. I mean, I'm being told by Trump's messaging that this is some radical, crazy liberal. And then what you see is in contrast. And you also see that she's having fun and seems sane and normal. It just is a win-win for her.
And joining us now, senior editor and elections analyst with a Cook Political Report, David Wasserman, and former Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo, who is also an MSNBC political analyst. So, Carlos, let me start with you. What's your reaction to this whole Robinson thing, that he's still staying in the race?
Jose, for about 15 years, Mitch McConnell has been lecturing Republicans on the importance of candidate quality and how you have to have people who are electable. Too often over the last decade and a half, Republican primaries have produced candidates that are not electable, that are very controversial, that make comments or engage in behaviors that are disqualifying. So in a state like North Carolina, which we could argue is a pink state for the most part, Mr. Robinson is probably going to get routed in that election, and for sure that could have major consequences both up and especially down the ballot. And again, this is someone who is very closely attached to President Trump's MAGA brand of politics. So there could certainly be an impact up ballot.
Dave, I mean, North Carolina was Biden's closest loss in 2020 against Trump. With this fresh scandal, do you think Democrats have reason to be hopeful that the state could be won this year?
Jose, 2 months ago, North Carolina was a lost cause for Democrats, and now it's squarely in the battleground. And there are two reasons for that. Number one, Kamala Harris has energized black voters, who are about 21% of the state's electorate. And number two, the Republican campaign for governor, obviously, at this point, the doctors have left the operating table. Mark Robinson's beyond saving, even if he's still on the ballot. And Kamala Harris's campaign went up with an ad just this afternoon in North Carolina linking Trump to Robinson via the statements that he's made praising him. So she's trying to make him own this. And Robinson does fit in with the MAGA brand that Democrats are trying to make voters reject in this election. And North Carolina was a 74,000 vote margin last time around. If I would estimate if Kamala Harris can raise the share of white college grads that vote for Democrats from 47% last time to 49% this time, that would be enough to put her over the top.
Yeah, Dave, you know, Cook Political Report has this great new interactive map highlighting the margins in swing states. North Carolina specifically shows how close it is. Can you walk us through some of these different counties, et cetera?
Sure. So North Carolina is a unique state because it's more small town and rural than, say, Georgia, where close to 60% of the vote is cast in metro Atlanta. If you combine Charlotte and the Research Triangle, it's only about 41% of the state's vote. And Democrats still have parts of the state where there's room to fall in the rural vote. But they're also experiencing growth in the outer suburbs. And if there's one county to watch this year, it's Cabarrus County, just north of Charlotte. And that's Concord and Kannapolis. And that is a place where Democrats basically cut Trump's margin in half between 2016 and 2020 from 19 points to 9 points. If she can get that closer to tied, that's the kind of part of the state where Democrats are going to need to make progress to get over the top.
Carlos, how much of an impact could this scandal have on the presidential ticket?
Well, Jose, I think all we need to do is rewind, look back a few years. 2018, why did Republicans lose the House? Because swing voters in swing districts all over the country rejected this aggressive type of MAGA politics, this type of politics that can offend people, candidates saying crude things, behaving in unacceptable ways. 2020, that's why Donald Trump lost and why Republicans lost the Senate in a state like Georgia, which ended up tipping the balance of control to Democrats. And then 2022, why was there no red wave throughout the country? Again, because some of these candidates that were so outlandish, out of the mainstream, that is what could really happen in North Carolina as a result of this dynamic we're seeing here today.
Joining us now, we have senior writer for The Dispatch, David Drucker, special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast, and the co-founder and CEO of All In Together and host of Majority Rules on Two-Way, and most importantly, celebrating her birthday today, Lauren Leader. Thank you all for being here. So Lauren has a birthday gift to you. You get first. Let's get your response. First of all, let's start with Trump's comments there about Jewish Americans and about how they would shoulder a lion's share of the blame were he to lose. I mean, that is such dangerous rhetoric.
I mean, really, only Trump can show up to a speech about anti-Semitism and immediately repeat a disgusting anti-Semitic trope, which is blame the Jews for whatever outcome you don't like that doesn't align with what I want. I mean, he can't help himself. And look, I mean, I think Trump has attracted a certain segment of certainly conservative Jews who see him as tougher on Hamas and have been frustrated by some of the dissent in the Democratic Party over Israel policy. And it's definitely been a winner for him. But you know, it's just so he's done this over and over again. I'm old enough to remember in 2016 when their campaign sent out one of the most anti-Semitic flyers I've ever seen with, you know, Stars of David and dollar bills on Hillary Clinton's face. I mean, they have a long history of this, embracing white supremacy. And of course, his own, you know, relationship with avowed white supremacist anti-Semites. So, you know, the lunches and dinners he's had at Mar-a-Lago with some of the most virulent anti-Semites. So it's par for the course. I shake my head. It's just, what can you say? It's like he does this over and over again.
And the defense of those chanting anti-Semitic things in Charlottesville as well back in 2017. So, Molly, on this topic, it's not, as Lauren just laid out for us, Trump said all these things yesterday and added that he said it was up to Israel to defeat Kamala Harris.
I mean, this is, again, an anti-Semitic trope, the idea that if you're Jewish, you're somehow connected to Israel. And look, Israel is an important part of a lot of Jews' lives, but it also is not. You know, you can be the idea that you have to be a certain kind of Jew in order to be Jewish is really quite anti-Semitic, and it is what Donald Trump does. And by the way, conservatives have been doing this forever, right? Saying that if you're, you know, Jews have like a long, I mean, I'm Jewish. My grandparents were fighting for civil rights in the South. Like, there's a long history of liberal Jews and of the connection between being an oppressed people, you know, joining an oppressed people. And it's some of the like parts of my family history that I am the most proud of is these kind of, you know, fights for equality. So the idea that somehow that we, you know, that Jews should throw all of this away in order to support a country which is a wonderful country, but is quite far away and is also not what is happening right now. Right now, this is an election that is about America.
So it's the dual loyalty.
Exactly right. In addition to all of that, at that very same event last night, Trump also said that he would reinstate a travel ban if he returns to the White House. Let's take a listen as to why he thinks that's necessary.
We will seal our border and bring back the travel ban. Remember the famous travel ban? We didn't take people from certain areas of the world because I didn't want to have people ripping down and burning our shopping centers and killing people. But we're not taking them from infested countries.
Infested countries. Molly, your latest piece has this headline: Donald Trump's Springfield scapegoat, in which you write, in part, Donald Trump doesn't so much run for something as he runs against somebody. His latest attacks are aimed at Haitian immigrants. But what we're seeing is a playbook previously used to target other ethnic or religious groups, and with a similar goal: to make the MAGA base feel like they're under attack. Trump needs his people to think America is on the brink of collapse and to associate that collapse with an other. The goal is to panic the base, and since there isn't a scary enough truth, lies will do. Trump's lie about Springfield might be particularly grotesque, but it's in the same tradition of racist rhetoric that he has been testing out since the beginning of his campaign and used again last night, Molly, I'll add, with the infested countries line. Just talk to us about, I mean, because there's real world ramifications about this. This isn't just scoring political points. This has put people's lives in danger. We have seen what's happened in Springfield, where there have been bomb threats, hospitals, City Hall, and schools closed.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is real. And look, he said it about Mexicans in 2016. You'll remember. He said, you know, he said racist lies about Obama. He said, you know, Muslims. He said it about Haitians now. And again, it is really just this othering, right? It's saying these lies about a group of people in order to get the base to feel they're besieged or that they're in danger. And then they'll maybe sign on to some of this really extreme legislation, right? Because if you look at Project 2025, a lot of that stuff is pretty off the, it's not anything that we're used to in America. And so the idea here is to do this is to make his base terrified and to make them think that somehow you won't have a country anymore. And, it's irrelevant. I mean, I feel so bad for these Haitian immigrants who are just working in Springfield, Ohio, right? Like the way my great grandparents came here. Like this is what America is about. And they are now can't go to school. They're scared to send their kids to school. Edwidge Danticat wrote a really brilliant op-ed in the Washington Post about how when she came, she Haitian immigrant, 20 years ago, she had the same kind of thing. And we're better than this as a country.
So, David Drucker, this is Trump making a base play, and it's one that the Harris campaign is painting as extreme. The rhetoric, Project 2025, all of that. And you've got reporting on how the Harris team is really targeting independents and even some disaffected Republicans in battleground states, namely Arizona.
Yeah, there's a whole micro campaign within the Harris campaign that is strictly focused on Republicans and conservative-leaning independents who don't like Donald Trump but are wary of supporting a Democrat for president because they haven't become more liberal during the Trump years. They're still sort of traditional Reagan-era conservatives. And so what the Harris campaign has done, number one, is put together a whole group of validators, Republicans that have endorsed Harris because they find Trump unpalatable for, a lot of the reasons we discuss on a daily basis, and sent them into these battleground states. And in Arizona in particular, they're sending them into deep red counties, not just throughout suburban Phoenix. And, we know that during the Trump era, suburban voters have drifted from the Republican Party. They've been supporting Democrats, but they've got people throughout the state. There are dedicated ads. There is a lot of phone banking and door knocking. And this is a very, again, like sort of micro targeting type of operation. And one thing I'll just say here is it's interesting what they're saying in order to try and move the needle here. What they're telling these voters is we're not here to ask you to re-register as Democrats or to become Democrats. What we're asking you to do is give the Republican Party some space to get back to what it used to be. We can debate whether that's possible, but what they're saying is we don't find Trump worthy of our vote. We're hoping to get past the Trump era to a point where we can start to vote for Republicans again, where you can start to vote for Republicans again. But for now, part of doing that involves supporting the vice president. And in Arizona, they invoke John McCain's name, which I'm told still has a lot of currency. And sort of related to that, Kari Lake gives them a way of pointing in a very direct way to how Trump has impacted the party.
We have 400 people in our audience and thousands more. Hello, all of you on screen. Hello, everybody on screen. I am here because I care deeply about the future of our country. And I know that all of you do too. Please welcome Kamala Harris. Wouldn't it be great if we brought all the groups together at one time? And that's why we're here. So we have the Cat Ladies for Kamala here. Rural Americans for Harris. Caregivers for Kamala. Train lovers for Harris Waltz. I didn't know there were train lovers. Train lovers. Chefs for Kamala. Love that group. Republicans for Harris. Love that group even more. Unite for America!
The event had all those constituency groups and others, and then it had some stars that, quite frankly, the Republican convention would have been very excited for even one contemporary A-lister, let alone this many. Bryan Cranston, Julia Roberts, Chris Rock, Ben Stiller, Meryl Streep. I am just listing some of them. And I'm going to remind you, as we've discussed on this program, culture, arts, music, these are things that bring us together, especially across generations. So before I go any deeper into the Harris event, I want to remind you how these powerful cultural and often beloved figures transcend our polarized politics.
Hey, Are you the little guy making all that big noise? Huh?
I don't understand why it's so difficult to confirm an appointment.
No, I'm so sorry, Miranda. I actually did confirm last
Details
night.
of your incompetence do not interest me.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
They stealing our money. The pension. You worked for 35 years. You thought you was gonna leave your kids a will. Now you're gonna leave them a won't.
I'm also just a girl standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her.
Hey, who can't relate to that? All of these stars who have connected with so many people are stepping out of their roles as thespians and into their role as a citizen, if I can be so bold. And these are people that command a following, command attention for all kinds of reasons. Oprah, using her skill set, bringing them all together to give their endorsements and the shine of their stars to Kamala Harris.
I'm just smiling from ear to ear, Oprah. I have never felt this much joy and optimism in a campaign in a long time.
I've always been a fan of Kamala, even back when she was running for. I remember writing her a check when she was like the district attorney for something. Maybe it was to get out of a parking ticket or something. But
I am a mother of 2 kids. This is their first chance to vote in an election, and I couldn't be more excited for them to have the legacy to say that their first vote they ever cast for president was for you. I have just chills saying that out loud.
I would like to say to you 2 women, thank you for what you represent, because as a 52-year-old childless woman, I want to say to the people who think that a woman's worth is measured in her baby count. I mean, shout out to all the amazing mothers, but the childless women have been mothering the world and elevating culture as aunts, godmothers, teachers, mentors, sisters, and friends, and the list goes on. And you do not need to push out a baby to help push humanity forward.
With Meryl, with the Meryl Streep clap. Who wouldn't like a Meryl Streep clap, honestly? Now, you can say, well, oh, Hollywood liberalism and all the other things we've heard, but the truth is, this is America, and people love the movies, and they love the music, and nowadays a lot of people love and follow the internet stars. And in a competition of campaigns, you're going to have a contrast, and you're going to have competition over who has the bigger stars, and it's not really close if you compare it to the RNC and Hulk Hogan, no disrespect, or Kid Rock, who does have some bops. But any cultural expert would tell you we're not at the same level and we're not at the same contemporary currency. Nothing wrong with a throwback. I love old music. But these are people at the top of their game right now. I mentioned Meryl Streep, who we all love. Nothing unique about that. 3-time Oscar winner, discussing Trump trying to steal or undermine the election.
What happens when you win and he doesn't accept it? And you know that there's going to be this long slog of shenanigans. And I'm wondering how we get to that moment, how we preserve certification on January 6th. Because if it doesn't happen, it'll be maybe thrown back to the legislatures of the states. And I wonder if we're ready for January 7th, 8th, 9th, and what happens?
Are we ready for January 7th is a serious and fair question. Now, in that setting, discussing these issues, as you saw, with real people affected, I showed you that serious moment earlier, with Oprah, and then with some of these cultural leaders, these artists that so many people relate to, Harris took on that question and said they're ready. They have the legal team. She's a lawyer herself, and they're going to deal with anything that happens. And then she covered many other topics over the broadcast.
One of the things that I have realized in the course of our campaign is that more Americans than we may realize who voted for Trump before have decided January 6th was just a bridge too far.
Debate
I'm a
when you
gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If
And I thought
somebody
that was
breaks in
powerful.
my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, yes. I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that.
But
my staff will deal with that later. Yeah. So part of my plan is to give startup small businesses a $50,000 tax deduction to start up their small business. Right now it's $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So that's part of my plan.
That's a teeny tiny business.
That's a business in
teeny tiny business.
It's a concept of a business, right?
Yes.
I said on the debate stage, look, because he's having a very difficult time, obviously, processing the fact that 81 million people fired him, right? Do not be afraid to vote. Because I think there is also something quite insidious about these attacks on the electorate in these various forms that are intended to convince people that their vote won't matter.
Kamala Harris putting in the context there more than one issue, and that was a lot of support of what Oprah can do. Jay-Z, someone who I've quoted before and who endorsed Barack Obama's first run and did a lot of the kind of cultural outreach we're seeing here, once said, Biggie Flo, shout out to O, we're going to need a million Mo, a million more Oprahs or Obamas. The O in that lyric is ambiguous. But Kamala Harris knows all about both O's, which brings us to another chapter tonight. I showed you a lot of Harris, but she's doing a lot of things. Her campaign, while she was in Michigan with Oprah, has the other O, Obama, on the trail today out in California. He, of course, also spoke at the DNC and has been used online. He, I can mention, blasted out that same Oprah broadcast today to his social media followers. He's in a new Harris ad that's been running. And this relationship, remember, you could say, oh, Democrats get along. They always support the nominee. Yes, you're supposed to. But this is a relationship that actually dates all the way back to his rise in 2008.
Barack has said it so well, feeling the audacity. And stand together and vote together on November 6th for President Barack Obama.
A dear, dear friend of mine, so I want everybody to do right by her. San Francisco District Attorney Kamala Harris.
He is right now someone who I am proud of as an American. He is a leader who has taken on some of the most difficult issues we face.
As your senator, Kamala Harris will be a fearless fighter for the people of California every single day. And my friend Kamala Harris, he's chosen an ideal partner who is more than prepared for the job.
You are doing great. You will continue to be doing great.
We need someone on that stage who has the ability to rebuild the Obama coalition. I believe I am that candidate.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you.
We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
Shout out to O. We're going to need a million Mo. Well, maybe Harris could be the next O. That's obviously on everyone's minds as they work together. And then you have the other stars who are speaking out in their own ways on their own platforms. Oprah's using her platform. She knows how to put on a great broadcast and give a great speech and touch those different notes I mentioned. Other people, like Billie Eilish, who endorsed and backed Harris and to urge people to vote, to over 100 million followers online this week, or Taylor Swift, whose endorsement has echoed since the debate, are doing their thing their way. It's an interesting time in politics. And yet, don't forget, the race is still tied in many of the key states. By the end of the hour, we have an Obama pollster about those margins of error. But first, we're going to discuss whether there is a million more O's on the way, as Kamala Harris seems to have all the stars you could ask for, capping a really big week.
Some of the first ballots for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are being cast right now as early in-person voting is officially underway in Virginia, Minnesota, and South Dakota. And while Virginia and Minnesota are reliably Democratic and South Dakota very Republican, this comes at a particularly fraught time, with both sides preparing now for what is expected to be a contested post-election. NBC's Ryan Nobles is live at a polling place in Virginia. Talk about what you're seeing there today, Ryan.
Yeah, Chris, we've been to 2 different polling locations in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Prince William County, where we are right now, and Fairfax County, Virginia, 2 consequential counties, and the enthusiasm levels are off the charts. We've seen long lines, people anxious to cast their ballot 45 days before the first day of election. And in what has been a bit of a change from previous years, it's not just Democrats voting early, it's Republicans as well. Take a listen.
We want to make sure that we're able to do it. I mean, we don't know what the future holds, so we were able and ready.
It felt great, and we normally vote early.
They've got it all set up pretty quick. Walk in, mark your ballot. Well, I prefer voting on Election Day in November. Sorry, but I was raised that way.
And in addition to all the activity we're seeing at polling locations, we're also seeing the parties make a specific pitch to their voters to get out and vote as soon as possible. This is an example. This is a Democratic event that's taking place in Manassas, very close to one of their early voting locations. And we see Democrats making a specific pitch to get their voters to the polls. In fact, we're going to talk quick here with Senator Mark Warner about this effort. Senator, Virginia, one of the earliest states in the country to start voting. How important is it for Democrats to get their voters to their polls even well before Election Day?
Get out, vote early. You're seeing huge energy, not just here in Manassas, but across the whole Commonwealth. You know, Ryan, in Virginia, we say each year, because we have an election every year, we say this is the most important year. This year, we're telling the truth. This is the most important election of our lifetime.
All right, Senator Warner, thank you so much for that.
Ryan.
And we'll continue to see this all day long. In fact, Virginia, these different counties, they'll have multiple early voting locations that will open as we get closer and closer to Election Day. They expect at least half of the voters in Virginia to vote before Election Day. Chris, we'll send it back to you.
Ryan Nobles, thank you so much for that. Joining me now, Steve Simon, Secretary of State for Minnesota and President of the National Association of Secretaries of State. It's so good to see you. And you said in an interview that this year you're hoping for high turnout and low drama. What are the chances of that?
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, those are my 2 wishes. You know, I'm actually cautiously optimistic. I think we've learned a lot from 2020, particularly about the drama part. We've learned a lot from a security standpoint. We've learned a lot from just the rhythm of the system standpoint. So I remain an optimist about all that.
So we have been reporting on election offices being mailed suspicious envelopes, white powder, those kinds of things. Some states are installing panic buttons for their workers, which brings me to the question, are you worried at all right now about states being able, and your state being able to recruit enough people, first of all, to actually run the election? We know that some people have said, who have done it in the past, they're afraid.
Yeah, and I can understand that because you read some of these reports. No one wants to face harassment or threats or intimidation just for doing this kind of civic duty. Speaking only for myself in Minnesota, it takes 30,000 people to be poll workers. 30,000 people have to step up and do that job. But look, in our state and in most states, there are good laws on the books that ought to ensure a tranquil experience, that ought to ensure some stability and an orderly process. Things like restrictions on who can be in a polling place, things like restrictions on what people can say or do when they're in a polling place, including challengers, people who are challenging people's eligibility. So I'm confident that with the experience we've had from past elections and with the good laws that we have on the books, not just in Minnesota, but in many states, we can contain that problem. What I'm more concerned about, frankly, is the other 364 days of the year. The elections administrators, not necessarily on game day, but the other days of the year who help run the show and run the election system, they continue to be targets, and we've got to get our arms around that as well.
Well, I mean, I can't imagine a more challenging time to be president of the Association of Secretaries of State, so good on you for that. But I know you're in touch with folks elsewhere, and I wonder what it is that keeps them up at night as you look ahead to the election and the days following and the vote count.
Well, I think, while not wanting to speak for any other particular secretary, my observation is that every secretary wants the same thing. They want an election that is trouble-free. They want an election where people can go about their business, they can vote without fear of any sort of intimidation, harassment, and that sort of thing. They want access, and they want security. And I think all of us in this community, secretaries of state, but folks at the local level as well, we are really having each other's backs, as we must. We don't always agree on every policy nuance or detail, but we have to have each other's backs. We're all in the democracy business.
But what does that mean as a practical matter, Mr. Secretary? Does it mean that most people who go to vote in your state and others might see a larger police presence or security presence? What should people know about, frankly, just plain old security?
Yeah, plain old security. They should know that there's been a ton of communication and planning up, down, and sideways. So with federal partners like the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, and in Minnesota and other states with our local law enforcement and folks at the county and city level, we're ready for this. And not just on Election Day, things like the Electoral College. December 17th is when every state, Minnesota and every state, will convene the Electoral College. We don't want that to be a focal point or some sort of target for any, planned disruption. So from the beginning to the end of the process, we really, from the standpoint of physical security, are on it. Now, how that will play out in different states is different. Minnesota law is different as to other states in terms of what you can do on game day with law enforcement present at the polling place. What I do know is that in every single state, without exception, law enforcement can at some point, and will, if need be called to a polling place if there is disruption, if there is the prospect that a voter will be harassed or threatened or intimidated. In some states, you can post them preemptively at the polling place. In other states like Minnesota, you can't do that, but they are on a moment's notice ready to come to a polling place if the need arises.
Let me ask you, finally, you were among the state officials who signed on to a letter raising concerns about the ability of the U.S. Postal Service to handle all the mail-in ballots this election season. You just heard in Virginia, they think they'll get half of people voting early. Have you received any reassurance from the Postmaster General since then?
Yes, we have, and I think they're taking the challenges seriously. And what we've said to them is, look, we got 46 days. We need your assurances that there will be resources in play, there will be extra training and emphasis in play, and that you'll give us in the states advice about what to do in our own particular states. The difference between a letter being a day late can be the difference between a voter's vote counting and not counting, depending on what state you're in. So I think they understand the gravity. Now they've just got to do what they have done in the past, including the COVID election of 2020, which is redouble their efforts, making sure they're spotting that elections-related mail, making sure they're giving it priority over the other kinds of mail. And those are the assurances we're seeking. They've been saying some of the right things. We just want to see the action. I expect it. I think we'll see it.